Reflecting on our journey here at Wentworth Woodhouse, one can only be amazed at the scale of challenges we face in conserving and maintaining this iconic property. And many of our impressive achievements are due to the contribution of Facilities Manager Julie Readman. Julie's first role with us started in March 2017, when Dame Julie Kenny, chair of Wentworth Woodhouse Preservation Trust, asked her to act as interim chief exec while a permanent appointment could be made. Dame Julie knew well her friend's skills and experience in working with the local business community.
Of course, I was delighted to help, but it wasn't just about purchasing a house. It was about setting off a whole new business. We had 14 staff, we had a busy events calendar, and there were lots of things to go wrong, including the first month when we couldn't pay anybody out of the bank account. The bank account wouldn't function properly. So when Sarah McLeod was appointed as the permanent chief executive, I was equally delighted to pass the mantle over to her.
But Julie's work wasn't done yet. In July 2017, she agreed to cover, again on an interim basis, the role of facilities manager, and her work took her to a whole new set of challenges. The footprint of Wentworth Woodhouse is 3 acres, with an additional 1.2 acres at the stable block, so any problems were going to be on a large scale. And big problems need big solutions, which usually means big costs. Julie had to set about trying to bring the house into the 21st century.
So in 2017, we just had limited satellite broadband at the mansion, which used to run out at the 24th of each month, which was a significant issue for us, obviously. The router was down here in the cellar, so we had to run up and down the stairs into the offices in order to reset it whenever we had a problem. So the initial quotes to get broadband into the mansion were very expensive. So we managed to get a link to the stables, and then we beamed the signal down to the house. And we now have a fully hardwired broadband network which powers our state-of-the-art systems.
Other problems soon surfaced, and Julie recognised 2 huge issues to be addressed urgently. The first was asbestos. After commissioning a survey of the whole site in 2017, she learned that over 500 separate areas were contaminated with asbestos materials, and much was lightweight asbestos used for lagging pipes between the 1950s and 70s, particularly dangerous if inhaled. The key question was, how much would it cost to sort this out?
And the answer was between £1 and £10 million, clearly too big a figure for us to manage to remove all the asbestos at once. So we had to break the project down into small chunks. So this area, for example, was a full airlock, and you weren't allowed to come into this section of the building unless you had full protective equipment on. And strangely enough, COVID was a time when we managed to get a lot of the asbestos out of these cellars when we had no visitors to the house at all.
Remarkably, between 2017 and 2023, over 86% of all asbestos contamination was removed, and residual areas are now fully tracked and managed. Once the work to protect people was underway, Julie moved on to the next serious problem: protecting the house. Water damage was obvious on numerous walls and ceilings, and at one time there were over 50 buckets collecting dripping water. We've covered our roof challenges in several videos on our YouTube channel, accessible using the link below, so do take a look. Suffice to say that Julie has played a key role in managing huge roof replacement projects in the Bedlam Wing, the Riding School, and, more recently, the North and South Pavilions and Clifford Lodgings. However, by far the most complex has been replacing the roof over the east front of the house. From 2019, the house was shrouded in emergency plastic sheeting, with 700 tons of scaffolding, 6,000 separate scaffolding planks, and 50,000 linear meters of scaffolding poles, all needed for the incredibly complex work of removing, replacing, and repairing the whole roof structure. To date, 65% of the roof of the whole house has been replaced, along with 20% of the roof at the stables. So far so good, but even a sound roof doesn't solve the problems of heating such an enormous property.
When we first came, the house was freezing most of the time. In the 1950s, this coal-fed system would have heated the house adequately, but that's been silent for some time. And even the gas boilers fitted by the previous owners, I'm afraid, weren't cutting the mustard. So here you can see our fabulous new heating system, much required to keep our lovely visitors warm, especially as the numbers increase year on year. But even this is something that we want to replace eventually and have a much greener ground source heat system in the future.
But as is frequently the case, solving one problem creates another. The new insulation in the roof structures and the heat provided by the new boilers caused cracks in the plasterwork as the building dried out, the Whistlejacket room being a particularly severe example. Another tricky job for Julie. And it isn't just these highly visible jobs that fall within Julie's remit. There are the invisible ones too, such as the water system. Investigations into the water network found complicated arrangements dating from 1843, with numerous additions of seemingly illogical routes.
So here we are down in the cellars, and we're looking at the drainage system, which has been here for 300 years. But understanding how all this functioned was really difficult because we had no plans. So whilst the old lead system had been replaced, probably in the 19th century, with cast iron pipework, it's still very difficult for us to connect cast iron to modern materials such as plastics. So fortunately, one of our great volunteers has managed to map our full water system throughout the mansion, which will really help us in the future.
Volunteer Gary Spooner has been particularly central to the success of the new heating installation, as well as understanding and mapping our entire gas and water systems. The overall list of maintenance tasks and challenges is endless. A team of clearance volunteers has removed over 500 tons of rubbish from the site, and repairs to doors, drains, brasswork, locks and other fixtures and fittings are always on the to-do list. More recently, to protect our historic buildings, fire and security upgrades have addressed external notification arrangements, along with provision of internal and external cameras and alarm systems. But with an annual maintenance budget of just $170,000, which is not nearly enough, Julie is aware that every penny counts. Firefighting critical challenges has been the focus in the past 6 years, but Julie is particularly proud of one restoration project she has been able to tackle.
Well, in 2023, we managed to complete this full restoration of these beautiful lampstands. This was made possible by a very kind donation, and it's a tribute to the artisan's work that you can't actually tell that a quarter of each of these lampstands are actually new cast iron. And look at these beautiful ram's heads. They're absolutely exquisite. The casting work on them is awesome. And now that we've got them gilded, they look even more spectacular. We discovered that one was missing in 2017, and fortunately we managed to find it in store.
I think it's safe to say that none of us would be where we are today here at Wentworth Woodhouse, and nor would the project itself have succeeded in the way it has without the contribution of Julie Readman. At the beginning, in those first 3 months as the temporary chief executive, but really where Julie has made most impact, I think, is since then in her role as she's taken over in charge of maintenance and with the capital works programme as well. Julie is an incredibly charismatic, pragmatic, clever, hard-working individual, and her influence continues here and will continue here going forward.
So, a short interim role became a 6-year stint. Julie is justly proud of her achievements and has now decided to pass on her legacy. So, what next?
So we've achieved quite a lot over the last 6 years, but I've likened it to a holy jumper. We have knitted a jumper, but there's lots of darning still to do. And I couldn't have done all this without lots of support from many maintenance volunteers and staff during that time. We've done a tremendous job. So what's in store for me now? Well, I'm hoping to continue some of the work that I started here and to do some volunteering here. I can really recommend doing a voluntary role at Wentworth Woodhouse. Please do get in touch if you're interested.